This is Neil Schneider for MTBS-TV at E3 Expo 2015. To my immediate right is Scott Harper, who's Creative Director for FOVE. Welcome to the program, Scott.
Hi, thanks. Nice to be here.
So Creative Director, usually when I hear Creative Director, I think video games. I don't think of hardware per se. What are your responsibilities here at FOVE?
So one of the things that we have to do at FOVE is present to developers, present to backers, especially with a Kickstarter. So the idea behind hiring a creative director is someone who can kind of oversee to make sure that what we're doing is something that users actually want, something that developers actually want. I've been in the games industry for 5 years now, so I've had a lot of experience, developing different things. So I know what developers want as well. So I'm overseeing to make sure that we're showing the right things with the hardware, and so that what we give people is something that's really usable, that's useful for them.
Can you talk a little bit about your earlier work?
I was a game designer at Backflip Studios, making mobile phone games, which it feels a little bit different than kind of the console stuff, but it's actually very, very useful for what we're doing, because with mobile you have to find the fun as soon as possible. If there's an instant that's not fun, you've lost them forever, because there are a million other free games out there. So I spent the last 5 years focusing exactly on getting to the fun and getting the essence of what is fun, what's usable, what are people going to actually pay attention to and like.
So I know this may sound like an obvious question, but going from gaming to FOVE to obviously hardware, where was the fun aspect? What drew you to FOVE?
The idea behind FOVE, the thing that really drew me here is, obviously, our thing is eye tracking, so making eye contact with different things in the world, and virtual reality is very, very cool. It's obviously where everybody wants to go. It's kind of the next wave of video gaming. But it's always felt a little bit incomplete to me, because you get crazy neck strain when you're whipping your head around, because you're targeting with your face, not really with your eyes or something useful. So when they showed me a demo where I could just look at things with my eyes and the world reacts to that, that really felt like it kind of completed the virtual reality experience that we're getting today. It's sort of like the capstone, if you will, of the VR experience, where suddenly you can sit down on your couch and be comfortable and interact with the world and everything as natively as as naturally as you want to, and there's no added extra neck strain. So it's very, very familiar.
Okay, well, let's rewind a little bit just to to refresh people's memory. So FOVE, we're talking about, if you're unfamiliar, is a head mount display.
Right. That
creates, of course, these virtual reality experiences. You have a successful Kickstarter at this point. Congratulations on that.
175% or more right now. So
can you elaborate a little bit on the specs of the head mount itself?
Yeah, right now we've got a WQHD screen, which is 2560 by 1440. And we're targeting 70 frames per second in our release headset. If we can get better, we'll let the backers know before we ship. The inside, we've got two infrared cameras that are going to be shooting at 120 frames per second, which is less than 10 milliseconds per cycle. So it's we've got less than 10 millisecond delay between when you look at something, and that's actually less time than your brain shuts off for when you move your eyes. So you move your eyes, your brain shuts off for 20, 25 milliseconds. So we've got plenty of time to figure out what you're actually looking at before you even realize what you're looking at.
So this is, I take it, the core of the eye tracking technology.
Exactly.
Yes? And from a creative director, what kind of creative things would you like to see happening with eye tracking that perhaps we hadn't seen with other solutions?
So we've seen there's a really famous to me example from the Oculus demos. There's a woman in a coffee shop that you're talking to. You're looking at her, and she's a little bit depressed, like you're in a relationship and you had a big fight and you went to a coffee shop or something, and you move your head to look at her, and she looks back up at you. And that's really cool and it's really powerful, but the problem with it is that you have to actually physically move your head, but you can be looking anywhere else in the coffee shop when she's looking back up at you, and so it's this kind of dishonest, disingenuous interaction that you see. So for me, I'm a huge role-playing game fan, and the idea is of making actual eye contact with the people you're talking to. So in our version of that demo, you look at you look at her with your eyes. You can keep your head down if for whatever you're feeling emotionally. Maybe you're a little bit depressed by the scene. And if you look up at her with her eyes, she'll see that and she'll look back up at you with her eyes, and maybe she'll move her head or something like that. So, which is as close to human as we can possibly get. And human feeling. It's actually like it's very, very simple to explain what it is, but when you actually experience, I looked at this person and then they look back at me and then they're like, what's up? Like, that's actually very, very emotionally powerful.
Yeah, it's like, when you think about it, the human-to-human interaction, maybe 30% of the value of the communication is in the text alone of what we say.
Right.
And the difference is all about our gestures, what we're looking at, how our tone of our voice.
Right.
That's actually far more important than the text itself. Like,
Yeah.
you can say, oh, it's a nice day, but that could have a million different
Right. It's like, it's a nice day. If your eyes are rolling your eyes at that point, then yeah, you're absolutely. It's like that changes the context of what you're saying.
So this, of course, has dramatic storytelling opportunities attached to it. I mean, if developers and content makers take advantage of this, we could see really radical changes in how stories are told.
Right.
in not just virtual reality. Well, actually, in this case, virtual reality.
Yeah.
But from a technical point of view, are there technical benefits to eye tracking that perhaps we didn't have benefits of before?
There are tons of technical advantages, very, very significant ones, actually. One of the easiest ones to kind of explain is depth of field rendering is an effect that computers and consoles are finally starting to be powerful enough that they can really make it, like, do the depth of field and make it feel very cinematic and very dramatic. But if you actually look at any of the better VR demos out there right now, they've all turned depth of field off. And the reason for that is because the way in video games and in computer games that we tell what to blur and what not to blur is by looking at the center of your screen, and that's the only thing available to people who are doing current VR demos right now is just the middle of your screen. But because it's in 3 dimensions, it's hard to, it's like, if you've ever seen like a 3D movie where there's like something is really blurry in the foreground and you're trying to look at it, it's a little bit frustrating because it's in 3D, it feels like you should be able to look at it, but the director has told you, no, sorry, you can't look at this. And so it pulls you out of the experience a little bit when you're trying to see something that's in 3D that feels more immersive, but it's not working the way that you expect it to work. So what we're doing, because we're tracking both eyes and we can project both of those into the 3D scene, we can find a convergence point and we can set the depth of field to where you're actually focusing on. So if let's say you're looking through a fence as kind of a worst case scenario, one of your eyes might be saying, oh, the eye is hitting the fence, but the other eye is not hitting the fence, and so what do you blur? Well, we can actually say, well, both eyes are actually beyond the fence, so we'll blur the fence and keep in focus whatever's behind that, or vice versa.
So for those who are unfamiliar, when we're talking about depth of field,
right,
when we naturally experience the world around us, if I'm, let's say, looking at that chair, I will focus on that chair, and suddenly things around the chair will be blurred in relation.
Yeah.
So by using eye tracking, we're able to simulate that in virtual reality. Is that a core idea?
It is. That is. I have to kind of qualify that a little bit in that, because what our eyes do is they actually adjust the focus, and in any virtual reality solution you're not going to be able to get that. It's called accommodation, and you're not going to be able to actually get that physical adjustment. But what we can do is we can artificially simulate the blurring that naturally happens to your eyes, which reduces the cognitive dissonance in what you're seeing versus what your brain expects to see, and that helps to keep you immersed, and it also helps to reduce things like motion sickness, VR sickness, and that sort of thing.
Now, part of this is, okay, so visually I get it, the eye tracking I get, of course. Now, big announcement with your already, as I said, successful Kickstarter is Lighthouse.
Lighthouse.
Yes, let's talk about that a bit. What's going on with Valve? Where you want to go with Lighthouse?
So we just the announcement was just earlier this week. So we've just kind of signed, the ink is drying on the page as we speak, for our agreement to work with Valve to get the Lighthouse integration. As you know, as I'm sure you know, it's free to license, so we're able to work with them. We'll be incorporating, assuming we hit the stretch goal, we'll be able to incorporate the Lighthouse sensors onto our device, and that will react with the lighthouse transmitter beacons that you can get, and what we get from that is the most accurate positional tracking system, the fastest, most accurate positional tracking system on the market, right? Well, it's not on the market yet, but it will be.
It's very exciting stuff. And how much do you need to raise to make that happen?
Right now, the stretch goal is 700,000. So we've got a little ways to go, but I think we can make it. Every Kickstarter picks up at the end. So. And
just so people understand the urgency, when does the Kickstarter finish off?
The last day is July 3rd or July 4th. So.
Wonderful stuff. Now, finally, another technical hurdle is performance. I mean, usually, if memory serves, I think 90 frames per second, less than 20 milliseconds, or even less than that, right, is the goal. Are there advantages with eye tracking that could possibly help to achieve that, or make it easier to achieve that with existing processing power?
There are. There's a technique that's I think it's pretty famous, but my world is kind of the technical VR world right now. It's called foveated rendering. So the fovea of the eye is the part of your eye that actually sees things as clearly as you perceive the world. So but it's actually a surprisingly small part of your vision. So as you're looking, there's a very small region of your vision that's only a couple degrees across you actually see detail, and your brain just fills in the rest of the details based on hints of the lower resolution that it sees on the periphery. So there's a very famous paper that Microsoft published where they said when they were able to do foveated rendering, they saw as much as a 5 to 6 times performance improvement for rendering. So right now, there's about 15% of machines that can actually handle VR resolution at VR frame rates using AAA quality shaders and that sort of thing. So when you only have to do all of that at full res for maybe 10% of your screen, suddenly a lot more machines are able to handle that load.
So in your opinion, how close is FOVE to making foveated rendering a reality?
We are very close. We've got the 120 frames a second cameras in Japan, so as soon as E3 is done going back there, that's what I'm doing, is I'm putting together like an actual real working demonstration of foveated rendering based on where you're looking. So at 120 frames a second, that's less than the 90 frames a second. So we get the image, we process where your eyes are looking, and then we can set that before the next frame is flipped and before your brain has turned back on to processing, knowing what it's looking at.
Now, I don't know if it's feasible to make a commitment on this. I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but what do you think the chances are that it could, a version of this could be available by the time you're shipping the units?
Absolutely, we're planning on getting shader support for our plugins and stuff working for that, but I've already started talking with some of the engine developers, and so far, I can't say anything officially, but they've all been very interested in integrating our headset. We signed on with the Valve OpenVR SDK, so we're going to support that. So they're working on integrating that, and they've also been very interested because their job is rendering performance in engines. So they've actually been very interested in seeing what we can do in terms of getting foveated rendering working on the engine, not just on shaders for each individual application. So I can't promise anything, but work has already begun talking towards those guys. So.
Do you think it's feasible?
I think it's feasible. It may have to be something that rolls out a little bit later after the launch, but I think we'll be over the next year to year and a half. I think we'll probably start seeing some more engine support for foveated rendering using our hardware.
Wonderful stuff. Well, congratulations on your continued success.
Thank you very much.
This is Neil Schneider for MTBS-TV at E3 Expo at FOVE's exhibit. We will, of course, be back with more. Thank you for watching.